Hi everyone. I'm going to kind of start by asking you some questions and see how, how successful this talk is going to be actually. So who in the room's got an Android device with them? Oh, good. That's going to be a really short talk if none of you put your hands up. So actually, rather than just talking at you, this is, during this talk, I'm going to get you all involved. And we're going to attempt to do a bit of a live demo. This slide, if you have seen the videos of me giving this talk before, used to say warning, but actually it doesn't need to really be a warning. But what we're going to do is I'm going to talk for a bit about the web API, some of the cool new APIs that are available to us, particularly on mobile devices. And then I'm going to demo them on your devices so that we can actually see what we can do with them. So if you want to join in with this, first, small caveats are I'm not going to steal any of your files or download any data to your phones or back to me. If you want to stop at any point because you don't like what I'm doing to your device, just close it and it will go away. There's no install required. It's literally just a web URL, so you can just close the tab. If you've got an iPhone, then you're safe because none of this works on Apple devices. So. But if you've got an Android, please join in because it'll be good fun. So if you'd like to join in, go to this URL along the top. It's quite long, so there's a QR code. When you load the page, it'll ask you for all of the permissions, which you have to accept in order for it to work. Make sure you go to HTTPS. It should redirect you if you don't. If you haven't got any signal, there is free Wi-Fi in here. It's called O2 Wi-Fi. I think you have to log in or something, but the demo's not until later in the talk, so you've got some time to do that. But I'll just give everybody a minute to get on there. Please make sure you accept all the permissions when you're doing this, and make sure your phone is not on battery saver mode, and make sure that your volume is turned up. Yes. That is a thing. I'm just going to give you all a minute to kind of do that, take a photo or whatever, and then I'll move on.
You can't join the Wi-Fi without coverage.
Without
mobile coverage, because you have to get a text message to join the Wi-Fi.
Oh dear, okay, so if you haven't been... Yeah. True. Okay, if you can't get on, then to watch what other people do. Okay, so hopefully some people have managed to get to a page that is all green with a big start button on it. You can just stay there for the time being, and I'll tell you when to hit start. If you've already pressed start, then that's fine. Okay, so let me kind of introduce the talk a little bit. My name is Mike Oram. I run Maiden Academy in Bath. We're a training company. We teach software developers, primarily junior, but we also do CPD and all sorts of other stuff, and run workshops at conferences and stuff. I talk a lot at PHP Southwest, which is the kind of the Bristol equivalent of this, I guess. And a couple of months ago, the organisers asked me if I would do a talk, kind of a bit last minute. So I thought it would be a great opportunity to mess around with, I guess, some of the new APIs that are available through the browser. So I did, and I built an application just to kind of test it out and see what I could do. Through doing that, I found some things that I wish I hadn't, I guess, or some things that I was surprised we could do that we have access to. And that's really why I've done the demo today, to kind of show you actually what's possible with this stuff. Some of it's experimental technology still, and most of it doesn't work on Apple devices, but that's basically what we're going to do. So it's kind of half about the APIs that are available and a little bit of warnings around things that you shouldn't be doing. So we'll start with some simple ones, ones that you've seen before. So Geolocation API, simple 3 lines of code here, will give us the latitude and longitude coordinates of the device. Works pretty much everywhere on all devices these days. Does require user permission, so when you ask for the location, it will pop up on the user's device and they have to say yes, and it only works on HTTPS. You've probably all used this one before, or at least seen it. Nothing massively new there. So let's have a look at the other end of the spectrum. The Share API. So this one's relatively new. We're talking sort of 6 to 8 months within Google. Only works on Android devices at the moment and only on Chrome on Android devices. But it basically allows you to hook into the native sharing capabilities of a mobile device. So yeah, it's literally just navigator.share, run that bit of JavaScript, and it will pop up the native sharing sort of pop up on your Android device, so you can share well, anything, any kind of URL via Twitter, Facebook, whatever platforms are actually installed on that device. There are no user permissions for this one. It will just work. It does require a user interaction, so you can't just randomly execute this code. It doesn't require HTTPS at all, so this will just work. The caveat for this one, which I found was quite interesting, is for some of these APIs that we're going to talk about, there's a differentiator as far as what they consider user interaction. So there's what they call passive and what they call active user interaction. So passive interactions are things that the user would be doing naturally in order to interact with your web page, like scrolling, for example. Whereas an active interaction is like actually clicking on a button, them kind of doing something that's, them asking the application to do something. This one doesn't matter what kind of user interaction you do, you can just execute it. So were you to put this code into a scroll event, you can just force them to share stuff on every pixel of scroll. Don't do that, but it is possible. Okay, next one, the vibration API. This one is pretty self-explanatory, allows you to make a user's device vibrate. You can either specify an amount of time in milliseconds that you'd like it to just vibrate once, or you can specify a pattern within an array where it will vibrate for that amount of time on and then off and on and off and so on. This, again, only works on Android devices, but will work on Chrome or Firefox on that on an Android device. Doesn't require any user permissions, it will just vibrate. The caveat to that is that actually Firefox on Android will ask you about it, but Chrome won't. It doesn't require HTTPS, so just kind of works straight out of the box. Okay, audio API. This is where they start to get a little bit more fun now. So this one allows us to play sounds, either to synthesize our own sounds or to play audio files through the user's device. The JavaScript's a little bit longer, and as these APIs become a little bit more complex, my code does get a little bit longer. I have put the slides online, and I tweeted it out earlier. I think PHP London picked that up, so if you want to get this code, you can pick it up later. But basically, the audio API allows us to synthesize any kind of sound that we want. So if you want to generate virtual pianos or whatever it might be, then you can use this API to actually synthesize any kinds of sounds through the user's device. This does work on Apple, iPhone, and pretty much all desktop stuff. Doesn't work on Microsoft. Yeah. There's no user permissions because it's just playing sound. Obviously, they can turn their sound down. There's no HTTPS required either. There's also, in theory, according to the actual spec, this does require a user interaction. In practice, it doesn't. There are ways around requiring a user interaction. For this, I'm not going to go into the specifics of it, but basically, if you just put it on a timeout from any other unrelated user interaction, then you can just play sounds whenever you want, which is what I'm going to do to you in a minute. So this one's actually part of the network status API. So this API gives us access to all the network information about a device. So the handy one that I like to use is the online-offline status. No, that isn't a typo. This is a question I get a lot. It is online with a capital L. I don't know why. But if you'd use it with a lowercase l, it doesn't work. And yeah, so that would literally just contain a Boolean of whether the device is currently connected to the internet or not, and allow you to, do whatever you want, show messages to your users when they're not connected anymore. But the network status API actually does quite a lot more. So it will There are properties in there that will tell you the kind of connection that they've got, so 3G, 2G, 4G, etc. You can pull their download and upload speeds. There's quite a few different bits of information in there, none of which I've managed to really find a massive use for, other than whether they're actually connected. But this works across all platforms at the moment. There's no user permissions, no HTTPS, it just works straight out of the box. So this is kind of the other side of the audio API. Call it the web speech or the speech synthesis API. So it is actually kind of or it came out at the same time as the audio API, but it's taken a little bit longer for people to actually implement it. This gives us the ability to basically turn whatever text we want into speech and make the user's device actually say stuff, rather than just synthesizing sounds. By default, this will use whatever the default speech is on that user's device, but you can from the speech synthesis object pull down a list of available voices for that device and then pick a voice. So if you've got a Mac, for example, it comes like pre-installed with about 15 different accents of voices, and you can just pick one of those and then make it speak in that accent if you want to. And you can set things like pitch and rate and make it sound really funny and stupid and like Pikachu if you want to. But yeah, it's not very many lines of code. It pretty much works across the board. It doesn't work in Internet Explorer. You might start to see a pattern here. But otherwise, it works in pretty much all devices. There's no user permissions. Again, no HTTPS required because it's just noise as far as the device is concerned. It doesn't know the difference between whether you're playing music or synthesizing speech. It is supposed to, like the other one, it is supposed to require user interaction. Again, there are ways around that, so you can just make it do stuff. But yeah, in theory, according to the spec, it requires the user to actually do something. So this one goes the other way. This is speech recognition. This is basically, so you might have heard about this one in the news because Facebook did it recently. You can turn people's devices into microphones and then just listen to what they're saying. Yeah, that's the thing. The code for it is a little bit longer. I mean, that actually will work. If you copy that out of my slides, then that does work. But yeah, pretty much it will turn the microphone on somebody's device and record what they're saying, send it back, and then you can do whatever you want to it, such as sending it back to somebody else. And then you can convert it into text. So it will recognize what they've said and then turn it into text. And it will also give you a percentage value of how accurate it thinks it is as to whether that's what they said. So we'll have a bit of a look at that later. Whilst doing that, it also sends it to Google. So be aware of that. Yeah. This one only works on Android devices and only on or Chrome on a desktop machine. It's basically Google only at the moment. Does require user permissions and does require HTTPS, so at least there's that. But there is no user interaction required. You can just kind of turn it on and off whenever you want. If you turn it on a device that has their sound turned up, then it makes a bit of a noise. It like makes a funny bleeping noise, which nobody knows what means, so it doesn't really help. But there's no visual cue to say that it's recording. If you're on a desktop machine, when it starts to record, there's a little red like recording icon that shows in the tab in Chrome. But when you're on a mobile device, you don't get that. So everyone's listening to us, I assume. Yeah. Push notifications. May have seen this before. This is part of the reason that every time you visit a website, you have to say like no to a million pop-ups because everybody wants to send you these. The code for this is way too long, so read that URL if you want to know how to do this. It's not massively difficult, but you do need to be aware of cross-site request forgery and making sure you're using tokens if you're going to do this. But basically, it gives us the ability to hook into native notifications within a user's mobile device. So you can pop stuff up like as if they got a text message. This runs when from the background. So they don't actually even have to be on the website for this to run. They can have visited it and then closed it down, provided the tab is still open. Or if you've got a web worker, the service worker is running in the background, then you can pop notifications up, which is really handy, but could be quite annoying. Or is quite annoying. At the moment, this is only Android devices, but it does work on Chrome or Firefox on Android. Does require user permissions. However, the user permissions for this one, which isn't the case for all of them, but the user permissions for this one, when you click OK, it will then remember that forever. So it will never ask you again, and it will just spam you with notifications. But it does require HTTPS, so I don't know if that's a good thing or not. OK. I think this is the last one before the demo. So the full screen API, this one's quite handy. When you're, if you're building a web-based application that you want to appear like a native one, particularly if you're doing sort of PWA stuff, it basically just forces the user's device into full screen mode or out of full screen mode if that's what you want. There's no user permissions, there's no HTTPS, it'll just do it. Obviously the user can then exit back out of full screen mode, so there's not really any reason for any security on it, but it could get quite annoying because there's no interaction required. So I wrote a thing that detected when the user went back and then put them back into full screen mode, which was really annoying, and then I had to turn my phone off. Don't do that. So this works on Android devices, doesn't work on Apple devices, but works on pretty much all of the browsers on a desktop machine except for Microsoft. Okay, let's have a go and see if we can demo some of this stuff on your devices. So if you haven't yet, then click Start, and it will sync to my server. Just going to give that a minute, just in case anybody's still syncing. Yeah, that means your device isn't supported. What phone is it?
Galaxy S8.
Is it? That should work.
Don't run it with the standard browser.
Oh, okay. Yeah. What browser are you using?
It's 5.6.
Yeah. Some of them work, but not enough for my demos.
There's a reason why I run this one.
Yeah, I'm not sure that security by just using a browser that doesn't support this stuff is a good way of doing it, but. Okay. All right. Let's have a go then. So I've got a couple of different ones to demonstrate. I've never done this one in a room this big, so I don't know how the sound stuff's going to go, whether we're actually going to be able to hear people's devices, but let's see. So I'm just going to set off some of your devices randomly and see what happens. Yeah, so that's just using the sound synthesis. So that's just it's a C# apparently, according to the internet. And let's just see if we can do all of them at once. No, did that work? Okay. Cool. Yeah, so that's just. Again, as I was saying earlier, kind of demonstrating that actually the sound stuff doesn't require user interaction. You can just arbitrarily play stuff through people's devices. This one you won't be able to hear, but if you've got a device, hopefully this will work. So I can just, with any luck, people's devices are randomly vibrating. Is this working? I'll just try and set all of them off in one go. Is that working? Cool. Yeah, so same principle. That's just using the code from earlier to turn the vibration on you. The geolocation one is, we're over there. There. Two of you maybe aren't as accurate as the others. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so this is just, I mean, you've all seen this before, so this is me pulling down your latitude and longitudes and then plotting it through a Google map. That's an interesting one because we're going to use that in a minute, but we'll see what happens. Okay, so let's try the speech one, so see if I can make some of your devices actually say stuff. Oh, thanks, guys. It would help if I could spell the, apparently, but there we go. Yeah, so this is just like the audio API from earlier with the sound synthesis, just hooking into the speech within your devices, and just, yeah, basically text to speech, so I can make it say whatever I want. You can also, as I said earlier, you can pull down a list of all the available voices, because I've got like 20 devices connected to me. I'm not doing that, so it's just using your defaults at the moment. Okay, I'm going to kind of need a bit of a volunteer now, so we'll see how this goes. So I'm going to do the speech to text one. So I need somebody to talk into their phone, and then with any luck, the information will come back to me and get printed out over here. So has anyone got a... Yeah? Okay, go on, give me a number.
334.
334. Okay, cool. So when I click on this, it'll turn blue, and then your phone will make a little like ding noise. Just say something for less than 5 seconds, a couple of words, and it hopefully after a while will come up on the screen. Okay?
Allowing permission. Hey, Rome, how you guys doing?
Okay, so not too bad, so 90%. So what you get back is the text representation of what the person said, or what it thinks they said, and you get yeah, a percentage of how accurate it thinks it is. Does anyone else want to have a go? Shout out a number. No? All happy? Okay, cool. So that one, at the moment, I've just got that listening on your device for 10 seconds, which is why I said to do it for less than that. But actually, there's no limit. You can just make it listen pretty much forever. And then you can put in stops where it will translate what they've said and send it to the server, but keep listening. I've just literally got it on 10 seconds and then stopping. But you could pretty much, from turning it on, just listen then forever. They have to, in order for this to work, they have to have the application or the website actually active. So as soon as they close a tab or just close the browser window or minimize it or whatever, then it would stop listening. But you could, in theory, just listen in the background of somebody's web page without them knowing if they had their volume turned down, which most of us tend to. Go on.
Hey.
348. You want to have a go with 348? Okay. Yeah. Oh, it's gone off the bottom. I'm going to have to... Sorry, hang on. I have to refresh. Let's try again. It should beep at you first. It didn't beep. Okay. I don't think that one wants to play ball. Okay. We'll do that one later. So I'm going to go back to there. Okay. Right. Okay. So I have got a couple more demos which I'll show you later. But I'm going to do a bit more speaking now. So the next one, I haven't got, the demo for this one is a little bit different. I'll talk to you about this one in a minute. But so there's a Bluetooth API. This gives us the ability to hook into the Bluetooth driver basically on somebody's device. You can do quite a lot with this one, provided that the Bluetooth on the user's device follows the CEC protocols. Then you can turn their Bluetooth on if it's not turned on already. You can then pull down a list of available Bluetooth devices in the area, and you can request to connect to those Bluetooth devices, provided that the connection is accepted. You can then take control of whatever that Bluetooth device is. Now, in theory, the way that this is supposed to work is that you call this method to request a device, and you can tell it to accept all devices, or you can give it the serial number, which is a UUID of the device that you know you want to connect to. And it would connect. If you tell it to accept all devices, what will happen is, and I'll demonstrate this in a minute, but you get a pop-up and it will show you all of the available devices in the area. So the user would then have to pick which device that they want to connect to. So for that reason, there is a user permission, because they actually have to pick the device. Once they pick the device and click OK, provided it connects, then it will successfully resolve the promise, and you can send commands to that Bluetooth device and kind of take control of it. The reason that this one is actually let me talk. So support-wise, this is Google only, so it's Chrome on Android or on desktop, and it only works via HTTPS, and it only works when the website is active. So you can't do this from a web worker, service worker in the background. You can't do it once they've closed the browser or minimized it or whatever. They actually have to be actively looking at the page. It has to be open in order for this to work. Now, the reason that this one is in a slightly different section is because despite none of the docs actually cover this, but I managed to make it do it by accident. There is a method within the Bluetooth API that will literally just give you an array of all the names and serial numbers, the UUIDs, of the devices that are available to connect. So if you call that method first of all to retrieve that array, then loop over it and call request device by plugging in the serial number, provided that the user's device has paired to it before, it will connect without telling the user, which then gives you the ability to control that Bluetooth device, potentially without them knowing. The reason that I know all this is because I did it in my house by accident. So this one kind of scared me a bit. I haven't put the code for that up, because you shouldn't be able to do it. And I did tell Google that you could do this, and they ignored me. So in theory, actually, with this, like I say, it's experimental at the moment, and it's only Android and Chrome. But yeah, in theory, you can connect to any Bluetooth device that they've paired to before, and then take control of it remotely through their device. So I haven't got that demo. But I have got a little demo just to show the kind of thing that you can, or that you should be able to do. Okay, so that's literally just turned Bluetooth on and is using exactly the code from the previous slide. So it's showing me all of the available devices, and you can see that it's given me a list of names, which at the moment it doesn't know because these are all unsupported devices, and then their IDs. So this is basically the list that you could pull and then loop through to try and connect. At the moment, obviously, none of these ones that it can see. Oh, there we go. There's one. So is that somebody's smartwatch? Looks like. So I could connect to that one if I want to. Yeah, there's a couple of them in here. To be expected, I guess, in a room full of techies. But yeah, so that's all just done through the browser's Bluetooth API. Okay, so let's talk about some of the other APIs that are available, or that are kind of, a lot of the ones that I've been talking about are still experimental, so some of these are. So let's start with the web USB one. So this is literally, it does what it says on the tin. It gives you the ability to connect to USB devices that are connected to their device. So if they've got memory sticks plugged in, then you can access the files on their memory sticks. It does require user permissions, don't worry, and requires HTTPS, because obviously that makes us feel better. But yeah, any device which is plugged in by USB, provided that it follows the web USB protocols, through JavaScript, you could take control of it and access it. Local storage and IndexedDB, these ones aren't massively new. You probably know about these already, but in case you don't, local storage is basically JavaScript sessions, like a PHP session. And IndexedDB is a browser-side database. So there are some limitations, like maximum storage size for IndexedDB, but it's pretty much just a database in the browser so that you can store data locally and then get it out much quicker than having to go back to the server for it. Payment gateway, that one gives us access to Apple Pay and Google Pay. That one does actually, or it's experimental, so you have to turn it on in the browser settings, but does work in both Android and iOS. And pretty much it means that when you get to a payment page, you can make a request to the payment gateway, and if they've got Apple Pay or Google Pay, then it will pop up and ask them to authenticate with the fingerprint. Once they authenticate, then it will send their card details to you so that they don't have to fill out a form, and you can just pay with your Apple Pay. The light sensor one, there's been quite a few articles about this one at the moment. It's relatively new, but there's a lot of stuff going on with UX and around it at the moment, and accessibility. This basically gives you access to the light sensor on the user's device and returns a floating point between 0 and 1 of how much light the device is detecting. This one's starting to become quite popular in use for turning on like dark mode, save people's eyes, so that can be quite good, particularly if you're to try and mirror a more native experience. Yeah, the clipboard API, this one's really experimental to the point where I couldn't even get it to do anything or work. You can't access things that were already in the clipboard. You can put stuff in the clipboard yourself, and then things that you put in there you can get back out. Or if you put it in there, then when you press Control-V or Command-V or whatever your shortcut is, it actually is in your real clipboard. But you can't access anything in the clipboard that you didn't put in there. So there is some security stuff there. But basically, it gives you the ability to store and retrieve data from the user's clipboard. Animation API. So if you're doing animations at the moment, you're probably using a library like Velocity.js, or maybe you're still using jQuery or something like that. A lot of the new API stuff, like Fetch, etc., is trying to replace the need for libraries. This one is the same, really. So this is trying to get rid of the need for something like Velocity.js by actually putting a nice way of animating stuff into a browser. It's rubbish. It's just they've royally cocked it up. I mean, it doesn't work yet. It's still well, it does. It's still experimental, so it hasn't completely been agreed. But it's not nice. Stick with your libraries for now, at least. And then the battery status one. People talk about this one quite a lot, but actually it doesn't exist anymore. Unless you haven't upgraded your browser for a while, then this doesn't actually exist. So this API used to allow us to access the amount of battery available on a user's device, or as well as see whether it's currently charging and how long is left until it will run out of battery, that kind of information. Small story around this one. As with a lot of these, I'm sure, this one was abused quite heavily by marketing people. Basically, what they found was that if they could track people across multiple sites and see how long it took them to get from one site to another by looking at how long was left to decharge in the mobile device when they were on site A, and then when they got to site B, what the difference in time was. And yeah, it basically meant that you could track people through multiple websites, and was a bad idea. And there were a couple of Google ads running code that was doing it. So they just got rid of the API altogether, so this doesn't actually work anymore. There is a lot more of these APIs built into your browsers. The Mozilla documentation has a list of, it's like 300 now. Most of them are not as exciting as the ones I was going through, but there is quite a big list of them. There is also, there is also a list of APIs that are currently being drafted or being considered. So for those of you that were joining in on the demo, you may have noticed that your device hasn't gone to sleep yet, and you've probably got some kind of 1 minute, 3 minute, 5 minute auto sleep, and yet it's still awake. So The wake clock API doesn't exist at all. It's being considered, but the idea is that it will allow us to prevent users' devices from being auto-locked. At the moment, there is a way of doing that anyway. It's just a bit of a hack. So there is a library called nosleep.js. And basically what it does is it plays a 1-pixel invisible video in the background. It's like half a second long and it just loops it. But because mobile devices think, let's not go to sleep whilst they're watching a video, it then disables the auto-locking feature of the device. So that's what I've done to your phones at the moment, which is why they're not asleep. The next one is the media capture. So this one actually does exist in Fire OS. In a minute, somebody's going to ask me what Fire OS is. And I will attempt to tell you. But this one is access to the camera, basically, or any other media captured things within your device, which is your camera. There is discussions of it having the ability to capture screenshots as well, but then there's potential security issues with that, because obviously there's not with having access to a camera. They're okay with that. It's being discussed at the moment, so hopefully that one's coming soon. And then the last one, which is really, really new, and there's not even actually a draft for this yet, but it's contact access. So that's being able to access the user's contacts within their phone. Let's hope that there's some user permission requirements for that one, that they have to actually accept that. Yeah, a little bit at the bottom is, when I was doing this, I was like, actually, just kind of thinking about these things was a bit like, really, are we actually going to let developers just randomly access people's cameras? But then when you think about it a little bit more, well, most of the apps that are natively installed on your phones already can do this stuff. So really, all we're doing is moving it into JavaScript. Yeah, all right. Okay, so that's all I've got. If you have any questions, please let me know. Feedback is very welcome, so please come and talk to me at the end if you like anything. But otherwise, please, questions. I think there's a microphone somewhere.
You also have like a nice icons, Safari, Android, and all the browsers. What about for example, Chrome on Safari or Internet Explorer Mobile on Android and so on and so on?
Yeah. So, oh, wrong way. That way. Yeah. So in some of these, I didn't want to put up the entire table of support because they get quite big.
It's more about the idea, how you was measure it. More you was thinking about the browser or more about the system?
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question.
When you was measure it, you was have in the background the system or the browser API? Browser limitation or the system limitation?
It's browser. All of these run through the browser. I mean, obviously, the browser has to interact with the system to a certain extent for some of them. Sure. But yeah, it's from our perspective, it's communicating with the browser, and then the browsers have got onwards APIs which are then communicating with the systems in order to access the actual hardware.
Yeah, cool. So there are like 100% access from the browser.
Yes.
And if the software is limitation,
So it's all just through JavaScript, just access straight through the browser, and then the specifications, that most of which are written by Google, are kind of dictate how a browser should implement both the API being exposed to us as a developer and how it should communicate with the device's system in order to effectively facilitate communication from the JavaScript all the way through to the operating system.
So based on what you've just said then, if I run Chrome on my iPhone, this will work?
No, so this is Android devices or Chrome on a desktop.
Not Chrome on other.
No.
It's like Chrome will have like good capabilities on Android, but different capabilities on iOS.
Possibly. At the moment, most of the stuff that it varies. Most of the stuff I've been talking about is only implemented on Android or on browsers within a desktop device. When these are implemented within iOS, then the functionality might be slightly different. The idea of the specifications which Google write is so that other manufacturers such as Apple will follow them, and therefore you get the same functionality, but there's no promises on that one. If you're following anything to do with service workers or web workers or manifest or local installation of PWAs at the moment, then you'll know that there's some differentiation between the way that Android have implemented it and the way that Apple and iOS have, and there's different features on both. So it may be that that there is different implementations within the two. It's too early to tell, I guess.
The specification part of W3C stuff.
Some of the ones I was talking about tonight are, yes. So the ones that are more supported, the geolocation, the geolocation, the vibration one, the share API, so some of those kind of more standard ones are a part of W3 now, yes. Some of the more experimental ones, the speech synthesis one, the speech recognition one are ones that have been written by Google and proposed to W3 but haven't actually been accepted yet, which is part of the reason that you can pretty much only use it on Chrome and Android.
So I got a question on, like you said, media capture. Is it the same one that PhoneGap or Cordova was using? Because I know like media storage has been around, media capture has been around for, I don't know, 8 years.
Yeah, so the media capture that you're talking about through like PhoneGap or something is via the native. So obviously PhoneGap compiles your JavaScript down to native code, and that's using the media capture native API. This one would be, the idea basically of the media capture API that I'm talking about is to interface your JavaScript to that API so that you don't have to compile through PhoneGap. You can just execute straight through the browser.
So it sounds like Google's really leading with this, or is it the Mozilla Foundation, or who's pushing it the most?
Yeah, it is mostly Google that's coming up with these things. The Mozilla Foundation get involved with the specification writing, which is why all of the specs and all the documentation for this is on the Mozilla website. So they work with Google, but actually most of the specs are originating from Google at the moment. So yeah, they are, as you say, kind of leading the way with this. It's basically, this is kind of the second phase push of the progressive web apps. So they did the manifest stuff and the service workers and the local installation. I was here a few months ago and talked about that stuff. So Google conceptualized those and implemented them into Android. This is kind of step 2 of that, making PWAs seem more native. So yeah, it's being driven by Google in order to try and phase out native as much as possible and kind of replace where we can with web-based.
Is that because they're trying to bring everything into Chrome, basically?
Yes. Yes.
It's ironic because iOS now is more of a Mozilla project.
Yes.
Now they're pushing that, and now they're second best,
Yeah, so in case anybody doesn't know, I get asked this one quite a lot. So FireOS was an operating system developed by Mozilla for the Fire tablet, which is not to be confused with the Amazon one. And yeah, they put some quite forward-thinking APIs into it. It could do some pretty cool stuff, like the media capture API, which is actually completely different from the one that Google is now proposing. different in the sense of its implementation, not different in the sense of what it actually had the ability to do. But yeah, so Fire OS, despite the fact that it never got off the ground and actually did have some pretty cool new stuff, and Google have kind of taken a lot of those ideas and actually turned them into real specifications. I couldn't possibly comment.
I was covered on my system. I was covered on my PC.
Sorry?
Fire OS. I was covered on my PC.
Oh, do you? Yeah, I honestly, I've never used it, so I just know about it because of the web API stuff from research.
Any more questions? Yeah, okay.
Sorry, I can't.
I was like curious if like are there like legislations or like laws of what they can access? Or
well, not really.
Just
So
like
that's kind of what the W3 stuff is about. So Google come up with these ideas. They put them into Android and Chrome because that's their software. They can pretty much do what they want with it. And then they submit the specifications to W3. And after a lot of criticism, W3 will hopefully accept them, and then it would ideally be rolled out to other platforms. So they're supposed to act as the legislative body, if you like, the ones that check that these things are all okay to do. But they don't. There's no way of them stopping Google putting them into their own software because it's theirs. They can do what they like, which is why a lot of this stuff is available in Android already, even though it hasn't actually been accepted as a real specification.
You might have to be conscious of GDPR though if you're starting to use some of these things.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure there'll be some laws around listening to people. I hope. Yeah, it's all right. Brexit will be fine.
Yes, this is not a question, more of like a speculation. I know like Google are pushing, like they've got another OS coming, I think Pushia or something like that. Could they be, like, could this be why they're pushing more towards Chrome? Because Android is a shared project with all these other OS.
Possibly. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, a lot of the newer, sort of lighter weight operating systems that are coming out at the moment are trying to move away from having native programs at all and just running everything through the web, which is part of what PWAs were and part of where this is coming from. So I can certainly see more operating systems, whether they're desktop based or mobile device based, relying on this stuff a lot more. Yes.